Well, I remember you spoke with a friend of mine probably a year ago, Dan Harris, and you did his podcast, and I was blown away by what you had to say there. So I'm excited to chat with you today and learn from you and share. You have an amazing story. Dr. Naidoo is the Harvard-trained nutritional psychiatrist, professional chef, and nutrition specialist. Doc, you serve as the director of nutritional and lifestyle psychiatry at the Massachusetts General Hospital and is on the faculty of Harvard. And as we can see in the background, she's an author and has 2 books. One really put you on our radar screen a few years ago with the book you wrote called This Is Your Brain on Food. And then last year you came out with Calm Your Mind with Food. So with all of our awakenings on nutrition and the environment and all of its impact, it sounds like the world is coming around to your unbelievable education.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that very much. I feel that slowly and steadily, more people are understanding that there's this connection. And I'm really grateful for it, because it turns out that nutrition is one of those factors that we can edit, change, and adjust to improve our physical and mental well-being. And, with the explosion of medications like Ozempic and other things like that, I think if we just went back to some simple principles, it may be easier for us.
And what would those principles be?
I talk about the pillars of nutritional psychiatry, and one of those pillars is just eat whole, be whole. And the example that I give is, eat the orange, enjoy it. It has vitamins, nutrients, fiber. It's delicious. And skip the store-bought orange juice, because that has the fiber removed and added sugars in it.
I thought I was being healthy drinking a glass of orange juice in the morning. Turns out it was the opposite. So I know when you chatted with our friend Dan Harris last year, you talked about, yes, the knowledge base is evolving. So no one ever says this is definitely never going to change. This is absolutely the case, because science and the research that people like you do is changing all the time. But
it is evolving. You're right. You're correct on that. And if I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no, go ahead.
I think it's also how advertising is conducted in the food world, and very specifically focused on that sector, because in a certain way you are taught that orange juice is good for you.
Yes.
But the way that it's made these days is very different to perhaps if your mother squeezed some oranges at home and made some juice. It's a totally different product what we get in the store.
I see. Because the processing so that it's shelf stable and has a consistent taste is what destroys the nutritional benefits. It does. And, I think there's a whole other issue on when we juice fruits and stuff, but for a longer conversation. The principle, though, is about just trying to reach out for the apple instead of the apple juice, or the broccoli instead of the now very clever broccoli nuggets that exist in stores that, may have a little bit of broccoli in them. But honestly, it's just easier to have the broccoli. So take us back. You were born a small child, not here.
No, I was born in Durban, South Africa, which is on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. And I had this amazing opportunity to study in Boston.
Now, how did that happen?
Well, it's a very interesting story. My fiance at the time, we were both, we were due to get married, and he wanted to spend a year studying overseas, and he literally called up Harvard University. It's in his TEDx talk, and he got through. How we still, it's one of those amazing stories in life, and people don't generally believe us when we tell them. But he somehow got his way to speak to someone at McLean Hospital, which is one of the largest teaching hospitals at Harvard, because he was interested in mental health and psychiatry. And he was subsequently, in a very short time, offered a research fellowship. So long story short, a few different changes, and we ended up in Boston. And for me, that opened up so many opportunities and doors, because I was meeting individuals who had written the textbooks, right, in the field that I study.
Had you already finished undergraduate school?
Yes, I had.
In South Africa?
That's correct, in Durban, South Africa. And so what was really cool was that I had not realized at this point how much influence growing up in my family had. And I know that sounds like a silly thing to say, but I had, despite all my accolades, I was a preschool dropout. I love telling the story because I still don't know how my parents let me stay with my maternal grandmother, to whom my first book is dedicated. She was so much more fun. She would grow fresh vegetables. She'd cook food. She and my grandfather would teach me cool things like yoga and meditation. And I would sit and eat lunch with them. And, I wasn't allowed in the kitchen. I was too little because my mom was actually at medical school during the day. So I'd hang out with her, but she'd let me do simple things like shell the peas or, pick the vegetables. And I didn't realize what a deep-seated impression that created in my life, because cut to later in my life, and I was prescribing heavy-hitting medications, and no one was talking about the side effects other than telling patients the side effects as a checklist. So you will gain weight, or this will happen, or that, but no one was going back and saying, what can you remediate? Can you eat differently? Can you do this? Can you add more exercise? And I was noticing that it was a gap, and a few things evolved. But one of the biggest opportunities I had by training at Harvard was the opportunity to start my clinic. And that clinic led to my writing the book, my first book, because it was really dedicated to working with individuals alongside medications or therapy that they were doing and which are important. But what else can you do in terms of your nutrition and lifestyle? And now the more additional focus is also metabolism, and in terms of mental health. So it evolved. I feel very fortunate that it evolved in that way.
Can you adjust your metabolism by the inputs?
You can certainly adjust how your mitochondria on a cellular level react by the choices you make in terms of the foods that you eat. There's some things that are predetermined through genetics, and of course the research is ongoing. But you can certainly understand better how your metabolism and mental health are connected also by the food that you eat. And that's where our general standard American diet, or SAD diet, as I like to call it, the acronym for that, is kind of sad, because it's very high in ultra processed foods. And it tends to be, for that reason, laden with not only ingredients that are processed, but colorants, dyes, stabilizers, and also a lot of added sugar. So that's where we go back to that principle of just eating whole foods.
Mm-hmm. I was reading just yesterday the increase in obesity, hypertension, and diabetes in the U.S. population, and the impact very directly it's having on life expectancy.
Yes.
And I would have to believe that all three of those circumstances are heavily influenced by our diet.
They are heavily influenced, and yet I think that our medical system goes toward a prescription pad or a virtual prescription pad these days way too fast, with the doctors being really pushed into these very short visits that they're permitted to see their patients. Usually the training goes towards an algorithm of what medication should be offered versus what are the lifestyle changes. Now, the hope is real, though, because there are areas of psychiatry like lifestyle psychiatry, nutritional lifestyle psychiatry, lifestyle medicine, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, that are really forward thinking around what are the other things someone can do. Can they improve their sleep? Sleep actually also can help your metabolism, improving your sleep. What can we do in terms of lifestyle, diet, and so many other things to just help round out a better and improved way of living to improve your physical and mental well-being.
Now, are the areas that you've studied and become so expert in, lifestyle psychiatry, nutritional psychiatry, are those big groups of people now, or is it still nascent?
It's still nascent. Let me share that. So before I speak directly about myself, I'll say that, the American Psychiatric Association is hosting a meeting during 2025 based on lifestyle factors. And it's very promising for many of us. there is an entire caucus and a colleague of mine who's brought forth lifestyle psychiatry as I've brought forth nutritional psychiatry. So these are really pillars that are growing alongside one another. There's another colleague of mine who's brought forth just metabolic psychiatry. So there are all these pieces that we really want to bring together. And I've just recently invited all of them to a committee that I'm forming at an association called the Group for the Advancement of Psychiatry, which is a think tank in the United States. And what we really do there is we create guidelines and we make really important decisions about how these more nascent areas can be brought forward. So the association itself deals with all conditions in mental health, but this is a great place to bring these nascent areas and help them grow and develop.
You know, when you say the practice of psychiatry, obviously a psychiatrist can and do prescribe medications. But it just seems to make sense when I read your bio and I listened to you speaking with Dan Harris. It just makes sense that the food is definitely another ingredient in that mix. And I would imagine different kinds of foods are going to react differently or interact differently with the medications that might be prescribed. But your premise of think about the food as another input, another medication, good or bad, seems to be essential to proper treatment.
It's really sort of this growing food as medicine movement is where I would place all these things that we're speaking about, because food can be good or bad. But I think the gap that I filled by bringing nutritional psychiatry forward, certainly with my first book, was that it not only affects your physical health or your waistline. You know, Americans tend to be very focused on weight and self-help books. Nothing wrong with that, but it is top of mind for many people. And I want to acknowledge that. But those same factors also affect your mental well-being. And the work around and research around the gut-brain connection, as well as other areas, have really helped to fill in those areas so that we understand now this important connection. And I feel that the first thing is for people to be aware. And from there, you hope that they can adjust some behaviors or at least understand some better options than those that exist.
If I sit down at lunch and I have a sandwich, how quickly would that food be digested and have whatever impact it's going to have on me and my system, and importantly to your area of expertise, on my mood?
Long and short of it is that when you have a meal, the meal and the components of that meal are broken down and digested. And the gut microbes, there are trillions of gut microbes in your gut microbiome, they are impacted and they start to respond. But the effect and impact in terms of mental well-being may take longer. Now, let me break that down a little bit further. I talk about another pillar of nutritional psychiatry called body intelligence. A person who's eating a less healthy meal for lunch, say they're eating a lot of fast food for lunch, and they follow that up with the milkshake, which follows the fast food. You know, they in the afternoon may have a real slump of energy. They may feel fatigued. They may feel like they need to take a nap. They may not be as productive at work. And then what happens? They grab another cup of coffee, or they go to a vending machine and get another snack. So that's body intelligence. And there's that short-term effect where you don't feel sprightly and sort of energized after eating a meal. I start to make that link for people. But for the most part, the longer-term effects on mood and things like anxiety do take a longer time to be set up, a few weeks, maybe up to a month, because what happens is if you consistently are changing your diet, say I had a patient that I worked with years ago who got a promotion at work, and that led her to travel extensively. And prior to that time, she was a healthy eater, exercising, preparing her meals at home, walking to work. But this promotion led to her eating fast foods, junk foods, airport meals, hotel snacks, drinking more wine because there were more networking dinners. And within a month or so, it had disrupted her microbiome. She developed some inflammation, and she developed anxiety. So, I think that by correcting your diet and working with her, we were able to reverse some of those changes. So there are those effects we feel more immediately, like fatigue or lack of energy or lack of focus. And then there are the long-term effects which occur on a more cellular level in your gut microbiome.
We've heard over the last couple of years, at least my sensitivity is the term gut microbiome has become popular and widely used. But what is it and how do you measure it?
Great questions. So this is also a really more recent discovery in medicine in that, Hippocrates really spoke to this, but the science had to follow. And in the last, I would say, 20 years or more, we've understood that the gut microbiome contains trillions of microbes that live there, reside there, and are there to really help you. But alongside the good microbes are the not great microbes, the bad guys. So the good microbes are there and they perform many functions. They help with digestion of food. They help with your immunity. They help with your sleep and circadian rhythm, which is your internal body clock, vitamin production, hormone production, mental well-being, and more. But when you are eating, for example, this is one factor that impacts them. And I'll go back to the embryology in a second. But if you're eating healthy foods, and most of the time, let's say 80% of the time, you're consuming healthy whole foods and a good diet, you're exercising, you're taking care of yourself, the good microbes are thriving, they're doing well. But like the individual that I mentioned whose diet switched very suddenly to really ultra-processed foods, the bad microbes thrive and they love sugar and they love kind of all the unhealthy ingredients in food. And when they thrive, they overcome the good microbes. And that's when you get set up for inflammation in your gut. And inflammation in the gut leads to inflammation in the brain because the gut and brain are connected. The gut and brain originate from the exact same cells in the human embryo. They form two different organs and they remain connected by the vagus nerve, which is our 10th cranial nerve. So something that affects the gut affects the brain. It's a bidirectional connection. And we also have to understand that about 90% of our neurotransmitter production and receptors are in the gut, like serotonin, for example. So as the food is being digested, it's also taking care of all of the receptors, the neurotransmitter production and all of that. And healthier foods just help the overall process, and less healthy foods are more damaging.
And you make in your newest book, Calm Your Mind with Food, what is it that you recommend people from an anxiety point of view? So many people suffer with anxiety, and sometimes I think the anxiety is anxious about being anxious. How do you prescribe that people think about managing their anxiety with their diet?
One of the things I speak about in the book is helping people understand some of the science behind it so that they can come to terms with it. Because the reason I wrote this book was that we know from research that anxiety increased by 25% worldwide during COVID.
25%? Wow.
Exactly. So it's a scary figure. And if you notice your friend, family member, colleague, even a Zoom colleague at that point when it was COVID, feeling more anxious, I think it was pretty much true. So I wrote the book really based on helping people understand the principles, understand that anxiety hides behind certain conditions like poor sleep or an inability to focus. You actually will find that a lot of those individuals, when you help with the anxiety, they can focus better. They sleep through the night. It's quite an amazing thing. So what I did is I separated the book out into sections where you understand the science, then you go into a protocol, a food plan, a shopping list. I call it an anti-anxiety shopping list, really meant for people to buy the book, take photographs, to check off these meals. It's really breaking it down for you. And it's a protocol that you can follow. And the protocol is linked to recipes at the back of the book. So if you like those foods in the protocol and you've checked it off your grocery list, then you can try making the recipes. And recipes are really meant to be simple, straightforward, and very flavorful. So people understand that healthy food can also be delicious. And so one of the most compelling notes I got was from someone who read the book and followed my protocol on his own. And he had been, I was so touched by this. He has had lifelong anxiety. He was not my patient. He bought the book and he had been planning.
There's his first mistake. He wasn't your patient.
He was not, but I appreciated that he actually followed the protocol. But Jim, he was very anxious. And you mentioned the comment, we get anxious about feeling anxious. It seemed like he was in this vicious cycle, but he wanted to accompany his teenage daughter to her first music concert. And she was excited about it, I think, planning from the year ahead. And he really wasn't sure how he was going to do this. So he came across my book. He decided he was going to try it. He started to follow the protocol, the shopping list, the recipes. And he wrote to me to say that not only did he help his anxiety, he was able to take his daughter to this concert. And he just wanted me to know.
What was his anxiety that caused him to think he wouldn't be able to do it?
He just had lifelong anxiety. So he had lifelong anxiety and medications had not helped. And this is the truth around the medications being prescribed. They do not always help anxiety. They actually do not always help mood. And sometimes the side effects are not great. But there are also people who really need the medications. So absolutely, when needed, we should prescribe them. But he had just been in this vicious cycle of never being able to almost figure it out, so to speak. So when he came across this new tool, he thought, let me try this and see what happens.
So how did he change his diet?
He didn't tell me the exact, in his note, he said that he followed pretty much the protocols step by step. I can share with you what I share with people is let's start to slowly cut back on foods that we know are unhealthy. So no one is saying stop eating ultra processed foods today and never eat it again. What we say is cut back slowly, increase your whole foods, your water intake, because it turns out if you're dehydrated, you can be very anxious. And feel very anxious. So increase that, increase your exercise, spend some time outdoors, learn a breath work exercise, which helps anxiety. Can you do other types of exercise if they help you? Because not only will that keep your fitness level good, but it helps with everything else. So there's a sort of protocol to follow. And then he followed steps like what are the foods you should be eating. So by doing that, he was naturally cutting back on the less healthy foods he was eating, like the orange juice you mentioned. It's marketed as healthy. Most people, not most, but many people drink orange juice for breakfast. So he cut back on things like that. He didn't understand hidden sugars were in foods like fruited yogurt. We know blueberries are healthy, but inside of a fruited yogurt, they can have up to 6 to 8 teaspoons of sugar in a small serving. So simple things like that he changed and he was feeling a lot better. And, he didn't share whether he came off or stopped his medications or anything like that, but he was actually able to manage to go to this concert with her. And to him, that felt like a momentous achievement. And, I just that's the reason that I write these books. That is the reason I do this work. It's that people find these other solutions.
It must be rewarding when you have a patient who's had a long-term condition like this fellow who read your book, and you can wean them off medications that are prescribed and help change how they feel by just introducing new prescriptions in the form of foods they should be eating. And I guess plotting that out over time is pretty dramatic in its manifestation of how much food and all the things we intake are changing our biome and ergo how we feel.
That's a great way to describe it because it does take time. It's a slow and steady process. And not everyone comes off medications. Some just take a lower dose. Some stay on the same dose, but the good thing is they don't have to increase that dose because they're using all these measures through food and nutrition to improve how they're feeling. So it is on a spectrum, sort of what each person needs and does. And it's become much more personalized over time. And you asked me earlier how we test the microbiome. A lot of hospitals these are not really tests that are usually covered by insurance yet. But there are lots of private companies that can test your microbiome and give you kind of a printout that you could take to your gastroenterologist or other doctor and discuss it with them.
And do you recommend people do that?
It depends on their situation. If they're really struggling with gut issues and discomfort and they want to understand better, food could be helpful. Working with a functional gastroenterologist, getting private testing is often very helpful. It really depends on the situation. I think they're also expensive, Jim, so not everyone may want to do that.
Yep. How expensive is it to get a biome?
I haven't checked recently, but it's usually hundreds of dollars to get. If you want the full test, it could even cost more. So.
Now, you mentioned earlier on some of the medications, and I wonder about the long-term impact. I've seen people in my social circle who've used Ozempic or some form of, and have dramatic weight loss. But then they can't really come off the Ozempic because they're afraid of the rubber band effect. Are there what else would you have on the horizon that you'd say a few years from now, I wonder what we'll think about these side effects of those Ozempic, PLP kinds of drugs?
My concern with them is not that they don't serve a function with individuals who are truly struggling with obesity, because those individuals definitely are fighting conditions that they need help with. My worry is that Ozempic sort of became for want of a better word, sort of something that celebrities and others had access to, and became more of a medication that people were obtaining, maybe not with the appropriate prescription. The actual medication itself has some side effects that are mixed. For example, some studies showed that it helped anxiety. Now, that isolated study, I quote and talk about, but I can't hang my hat on that because it may not be the same in everyone. And it could be related to the fact that the weight loss improved the person's metabolism. And we know that metabolism is linked to anxiety. So I can see clinically there's a connection there. But some of the issues are people cannot stop taking that because if they do, the weight comes back. Also, there was a report from Europe that it increased suicide or suicidal ideation. So that was concerning.
Yeah, we are hearing that some people find their cravings for all kinds of things to decline. They gamble less, they drink less, et cetera. And that's interesting byproduct.
That is interesting and may actually be helpful if they were struggling with those conditions. The other side of that, though, is people lose sort of the pleasure of what they eat and the taste and the flavor, and they just lose that joy around some food that they might have eaten. So there are these, maybe a reduction in gambling and less need or use or want of alcohol, but other things as well. What would I say? I think that the thing I'm most excited about is what can we develop through the gut microbiome that could be in taking the story of food as medicine, and things like the newer products that are being investigated, like psychobiotics and symbiotics and multiple different But essentially, for me, it's how can we take food and convert it into being used for the gut microbiome in a way that actually helps heal us, whether it's a physical or mental condition. And I think it can be done with the appropriate research. I really do.
I wonder if we can see a time when the cost of testing your own biome comes down in price to a level that's much more approachable. That'll be a regular part of your annual checkup and a way to measure the impact of your change in diet, things like that.
I really hope so, and I would love to see that. And I think I didn't recently check the prices of these tests, so there might be vendors or companies that are offering them at a more reasonable rate now. But to your point, I'd love to see it be part of our standard exam every year. That why not we check that and assess if it's going to have some sort of impact.
Probably a dozen years ago, I was traveling with a friend who ran a pharma company, and he asked me if I took a statin, and I said no, my cholesterol's fine. He said, well, you should probably take a statin anyway. I said, why? He said, well, statin is like the wonder drug of our generation, and your cholesterol can never be good enough. So a couple of months later, I had my annual checkup and asked my doc about a statin. He goes, you don't need a statin. Your cholesterol's fine. And I shared with him the conversation I had with my buddy. He goes, man, that makes sense. And he prescribed a statin for me. But now we're hearing from several different camps that statin use, and certainly long-term statin use, is not good for us. Your thoughts?
I don't think that they're good for us long-term. And I wish that we could engage in more lifestyle measures earlier on to help people not reach the point where the doctors feel uncomfortable with the reading that they have, that they need to prescribe something. And I think that the conversation with statins, as with other medications in psychiatry, including selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, is very nuanced and is very mixed. And I think that there are many people, if we did this earlier on and helped them with lifestyle measures and a food prescription of sorts, that they could avoid taking a statin. Because statins, while they may help, they also have many side effects. So I can't say I'm a fan. And I have heard that from other doctors that, it's the medication, that has done X, Y, and Z. But I think that with all medications, like we just spoke about Ozempic, they are helpful for some individuals and they can be life-saving, just like Prozac can be life-saving for individuals. But it's not the same for everyone. And we're understanding more and more that medicine is so much more personalized and precision-based than it used to be. Hence, the gut microbiome, your readings will be different from mine, from the next person.
And continuing down the same list, proton pump inhibitors. Your thoughts? Should we be using them?
This is a tough one because
it's got to impact the biome, right?
It does. They have a lot of gastrointestinal discomfort, GERD, and other conditions. And, I would love to be more up to date on what the research shows between the use of those and what is the direct impact on the gut microbiome. Because you're eating your food, you're consuming these pills, your gut microbiome is upset, things are going on. And, there are definitely some functional gastroenterologists who will say, who are of the camp, let's try to heal your gut microbiome through food and other measures before we just throw more medications at you.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm not against medications. I believe that they have saved the lives of several of my patients in mental health. However, they are not the be all and end all. And I think that we live in a medical system that practices defensive medicine instead of preventive medicine, and helping us not get to that condition or state where we need the statin or we need the PPI, and rather what can we be doing in our lives now to have a healthy microbiome, to have a lower level of inflammation in our bodies.
And when you say inflammation, I understand the term, but what does that mean, that you have inflammation in your body?
So there are two types of inflammation. One is the acute. So you play tennis and you twist your knee, or you fall over and scrape your knee. That's an important part of healing. But the more chronic and serious inflammation that I'm referring to is that gets set up in the gut microbiome, where we are very stressed, we eating less healthy food, we eating junk foods, fast foods, lots of sodas and things like that, which are driving the bad microbes to really thrive in the gut. Because when they take over, they cause inflammation of the gut microbiome.
So the inflammation can be in the gut.
It can be in the gut. It gets set up as inflammation. You can measure this through inflammatory markers. There are a few different things you can do. But what happens is that when the gut, when we are eating less healthy foods, the breakdown products of digestion can be negative in the gut. So when you're eating good, healthy whole foods, colorful vegetables, good proteins, healthy fats, the breakdown products are called short-chain fatty acids. They help the gut. They have positive functions. But the opposite is also true. The negative breakdown products are toxic polysaccharides, and they damage the lining of the gut, and they start to cause leakage into the blood circulation. So that's when you start to get really problems start to occur. So it's a different type of inflammation that we're talking about, but it is relevant to several conditions. I see the connection in mental health where the young lady I mentioned earlier in our conversation, she developed inflammation in the gut that was thrown off entirely by her diet changing so rapidly and suddenly. And once we started to work on the healing of a gut and kind of correcting that balance back to a healthier place, her symptoms got a lot better.
If we were going out to dinner tonight, what are you going to order?
What am I going to order? So I love lots of vegetables. I love proteins like tofu, tempeh, even an entire vegetable plate with some quinoa, because that gives me protein and that gives me fiber. Avocados. I love things with spice. So anything with a lot of flavor and spices and, maybe Pan-Asian flavors are one of my favorite, would be great. So lots of vegetables. I happen to have been born into a vegetarian family. The rest of my family is not, but I am, and I remain vegetarian. So my being vegetarian, I just want to be completely transparent, is not based on some food principle. It's more that I was raised that way, and that was what I was used to. But I cook anything as well as a chef. So that's why it would be more plant-based. One of the things I love testing at home is how to make a cauliflower. Say someone else in the family has a steak, I can have a cauliflower steak, but I'll change up the flavors, from a miso glaze to tikka masala, to different ways to make it interesting. So
tell us, with all the things you have going on, what's a typical day look like for you? What time do you get up in the morning?
I get up way too early. And it just happens to be, I'm one of those people, my eyes kind of open pretty early, like between 4:30 and 5. So rather than, if I'm tired and I've had a late night or been busy or traveling, I will sleep till 6 or 7. But if I get up early, I use that time for a little bit of reflection, to watch depending on the time of day, watch the sunrise, meditate, have a glass of water is critical for me in the morning, because I feel like we wake up sort of dehydrated from whatever we've done the day before, because we've been sleeping. And that's really helpful for me. It's also helpful for any level of anxiety one might have. And yoga and meditation are usually small parts of my morning before I start the day. I love coffee. I'm a big believer that what you put in your coffee is very relevant.
And you put what in? Anything?
Yes, exactly. So I like hemp milk. I make my own hemp milk at home. I just make it from the hemp seeds. And that way, because I travel so much, it never goes bad.
I'm a tea drinker, and I drink tea all morning. Now, what about the types of teas, growing up where you did and how you did? Are you prescriptive about the kinds of teas that people use?
So that's such a great question, because in both my books, I do talk about different teas. Like in Calm Your Mind with Food, I talk about a lavender tea, a passion flower tea. And I like to say, eat the blues to beat the blues, because things like passion flower tea are blue, and berries are blue, blueberries are blue. But these have really great impacts on our not only a gut microbiome, but they have anti-inflammatory effects, which are really helpful for lowering anxiety. So it's not that you drink 2 cups and you lower your anxiety. It's more that you do exactly what you're doing. You drink those teas consistently. Chamomile is another one. Green tea is another one. But these can be very helpful. They can also be, if you're just drinking a plain tea, they can be somewhat hydrating as well. I'd still like people to drink water, but it's also a way to stay hydrated during the day.
So you get up early in the morning, you use that time to meditate, to get outdoors when you can, to observe a sunrise, and then you're just running crazy the rest of the day?
No, so I tend to exercise on certain days of the week, but I get my exercise done in the morning, so it's sort of out of my way. So I'll go to the gym, for whatever time I can account for that day. And then next thing is, having my second cup of coffee. I tend to eat breakfast a little bit later, and my favorite breakfast is like a homemade chia pudding because I can make them ahead, or some plain yogurt and berries and some cinnamon, something easy that I don't have to spend a lot of time making.
What kind of yogurt do you buy?
So I either have a plain grass-fed yogurt that's dairy or non-dairy based. It could be one of the coconut yogurts that are plain. They have lots of good ones now. And then I flavor it up with what I like. I make a homemade granola because I can control what I put into it. And all of these recipes, by the way, in my books, add on berries, cinnamon, a drop of Manuka honey, and that's something nutritious to eat. And, I make my way through podcasts, meetings, telehealth visits that I need to do, my research, all of that, and then break for lunch. I learned the hard way that I had to put lunch into my schedule. If not, I would end up during COVID at 4 p.m. and I would have skipped lunch. So that taught me to put lunch into my schedule. So I have to stop and do something. And whether it's have a lovely salad or make a soup or maybe a soup I made the day before. And then
can I assume soups are good?
Soups are good. Depending on what you put in them. I like to make lots of hearty vegetable soups that are really light, but have lots of vegetables in them, healthy legumes. And, for someone else in the family, I might add some chicken, shredded chicken to it, or other forms of meat so that they have the protein from that source. And these are good because I can make a batch ahead and, have them portioned out. And I love to make them in a very flavorful way. So adding those spices and fresh herbs are great. Afternoon, I try to walk if I can, and it's not always possible. I'm usually very disappointed if I can't get outside in the afternoon for a walk. And in the evening, a dinner and some downtime with, my family, and pretty much trying to wind down in the evening. So
family is attuned to your career and your knowledge and your writings, and so everyone in the family follows a pretty healthy regimen.
No, I wouldn't say that. No. And it's like my test kitchen. It's like my test kitchen in my lab. My family is. So it's really funny because I think that even I am not a perfect eater or anything like that. But I think that that's what helps me understand the lens of how people think and feel in the world. It's that not everyone, someone wants cookies, someone else wants chocolate, and whatever it is. So it's trying to, I think that years ago, I fought the soda battle, and we moved from soda to diet soda to something else. And eventually, over years, we got to plain water and maybe a plain sparkling water, and lemon. A lemon is a great addition to it, or limes, things like that. So it's sort of, like I said, it's my lab as well, because I get to experience these different viewpoints.
Yeah, I gave up soda once. I was a Diet Coke drinker, and I gave it up for 5 years, and then I craved it in that afternoon, that the caffeine kick in. And so I've quit it again about a year and a half ago, but I still crave a Diet Coke.
It happens. People just love the taste, the flavor. They're used to it. Their body is used to it. I would say something that you probably won't want to try, but I would say to people, if they're looking for that little bit of a lift in the afternoon, believe it or not, green tea gives you an energy boost without the buzz, if that makes sense, since you're a tea drinker. But I understand that. I understand that people feel that way about chocolate and lots of other things.
Well, you are one busy doctor, and the amazing thing, I think we're going to be looking to you more and more for this information, because it's almost silly that it hasn't been front and center in our whole thinking on medical and medical issues and health. And in your case, its impact on mental health. It seems awfully obvious, but it's taking you and your life's research to really bring it to our attention. And that's why everyone was going to be out buying Calm Your Mind with Food. And your first book, which is This Is Your Brain on Food, which is a takeoff on a very famous commercial. And boy, but that imagery is powerful because food is a different kind of drug, and food is medicine, as you call it, is it just makes all the sense in the world. And I think we have a lot more to learn, and we're so thankful that you're doing your work to teach us there. So I hope we get to dine together sometime, because
I would love that.
I bet you're talented not only in your research and in your practice, but in the kitchen too.
Oh, I'd love that. And I think that would be so much fun.
Thanks, Dr. Naidoo. You're terrific. I love the work you're doing, and I hope we get to learn a lot more from you in the months and years ahead.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.